Talkin Beavers is presented by Par Lumber. Oregon State takes care of business on Saturday, downing the Cardinals 62-17, and now all attention turns to this Saturday as a top 10 showdown is coming to Corvallis. Welcome into Talkin Beavers. I'm Agent McCord alongside Jason Jean-Baptiste, defensive end for Oregon State 2001-2003, and of course the voice of the Beavers, Mike Parker. You guys, this was a massive win for Oregon State. Get it done really primarily in the first half. Get a chance to sort of get some new faces in the second half. I want to get your initial thoughts about this win over Stanford.
I think from the outset you could tell that these guys were inspired. They knew exactly what they needed to do. They ran the ball initially, and then they kept on running the ball over and over and over again to the tune of 4 touchdowns in the first half. And I think, when they're playing like this, when they're at home, when the defense is, on edge and they're attacking and they're flying all over the field, Chatfield started the game having a sack and then he had an interception and vice versa. I think they're a really hard team to beat, and we just hope that this is what we'll see coming down the line for a team that we know that we're playing this coming week. But Mike, I think you'd agree that it was simply a phenomenal game by them from the very outset of the game.
I had some misgivings about would there be any tendency to think about the big game that we certainly are going to be talking about here in a moment, namely the Washington Huskies. It was clear from the outset that wasn't going to be a problem for the Beavers. They intercept 4 passes. They harass Stanford all game long. But offensively, just a thing of beauty, and the balance, DJU hitting big shots down the field again. Damien Martinez, as you alluded to, with 4 rushing touchdowns in the first half. It was beautiful football, but it was also just a beautiful experience in the afternoon and into the early evening at Reser. A sellout crowd, an appreciative crowd, a Hall of Fame weekend with Dennis Erickson and Mike Riley and Steven Jackson and Mike Hass and Brent Berry and many other stars gracing the field, walking around the stands, interacting with the fans. It was just a special atmosphere, which I think is only going to ramp up even to greater heights this weekend.
Mike, I have no doubt that you're correct. And Jonathan Smith talking this week about just how critical that Reser Stadium crowd is going to be. So with the Stanford Cardinal behind us, let's turn the page, shall we? It is time for our opening drive, brought to you by Capital Toyota, your way on the Parkway. Saturday afternoon, the Washington Huskies, ranked 5th in the AP poll, coming down to Corvallis. The 10th ranked Oregon State Beavers look to do something that nobody has done this season, and that is beat the Washington Huskies. Undefeated this team is, you guys. I want to ask you, first look, what makes this Huskies team so challenging to beat, Mike?
The thing that's happening with them, and it happens in any kind of special season, they're trying to do what the 91 Huskies did, namely run the table and win a national championship. A slight difference between my recollection of that 91 group, they only had one close game really all year, and they won it at Berkeley. This Washington team, to their great credit, is finding ways to win games when they're not necessarily playing their best football, and they're winning in a variety of ways. Whether they need to score a lot of points as they did against USC, whether they need to grind out and get a pick 6 against Arizona State in a game in Seattle where the Sun Devils nearly had them beat, they find a way to do that. And then they recovered from a really poor defensive first half against Utah to shut the Utes out in the second half and win last week too. So they have the mark of a championship caliber team, and that even on days when they don't have their best stuff, they're still winning. That's a little frightening. They're going to come into Reser Stadium ultra confident because of all of that.
But the one thing that I will say about them, and Oregon State is also susceptible to this, is that they do struggle when they're on the road. Playing against SC, playing against Stanford, playing against Arizona, all 3 of those games, all 3 of those matchups, they struggled and could have very easily had losses. So now coming into Reser, again, it's going to be a primetime game. It's going to be, rainy. It's going to be, a sellout crowd. We're going to need, the fans and the fan base to make it hard on them because, they will struggle a little bit. But again, I think it's one of those things like where they'll make adjustments, but it's up to Oregon State and up to the coaching staff to get our players ready to play the game.
And Jason, that's exactly what Jonathan Smith talked about this week. He said in these big time games, it all comes down to the process of your preparation. And oftentimes, these games are about simply who does not screw up their game plan, right? Who doesn't let the pressure of the moment get to them. And so, Jason, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Wait, I got to come back to you, Jason. We're getting interrupted again?
Hey, gang, thanks for having us here in your little cute beaver party on TV. Softy, Cam Cleveland, of course, with me on the TV show. But I got to tell you, I don't know where this confidence comes from down there in Corvallis. It's really kind of funny, to be honest with you, because, hey, 8-2 is nice. 8-2 is really kind of cool that you've played 10 games, you won 8, but you haven't beaten anybody. Who have you beaten? You lost to Wazoo, for God's sakes. You lost to Arizona. Cam Ward, you can't even beat Cam Ward. What makes you think you can beat Michael Penix, for crying out loud? Why don't you play somebody? All right, you're crowing about 8-2. You're yapping your gums about 8-2. Why don't you beat somebody that somebody around the country has heard of? I got my old school helmet here, signed by a bunch of guys from back in the day. Some of these guys are dead. Some of these guys are in walkers and wheelchairs. These guys could put a helmet on right now and walk into Reser Stadium and beat you. And don't forget, when you guys have success, there's usually two things that put an end to it. One is the team in Eugene, and the other is Washington. You can't even pump your own gas in Oregon, for God's sakes. What makes you think you can beat the number 5 team in America? Hey, baby, UW comes to Reser Stadium, and they win this game by 100. And I'm certain if Oregon State wins the game on Saturday, that you will not play this on your show next week. Cam, anything to offer?
Nope.
Hold on. This happened before, and I didn't like the turnout of the game, all right? So this time around, it's another Washington team. Now we're going to return the favor. Since we can't play that team anymore, we're going to return the favor this time against this Washington team, and we'll see what happens come Saturday.
Softy, Cam, I love you guys. I mean, you know that. We've been on each other's radio shows this week. That's the great mutual respect, I hope, and affection we have for one another through all these decades. But not Saturday, because you guys have been walking a fine line too long, teetering against these different teams. You're coming to Reser Stadium, this time you fall off.
I simply do not like when my program gets usurped. So for that reason alone, it's going to be Oregon State on Saturday. They have been solid, they have been consistent, especially in these last few weeks. And they're not going to be intimidated by those Huskies. So I certainly cannot wait to have another reaction next week when we get the results of this game on Saturday. And one player who absolutely is going to make his presence heard on Saturday against the Huskies, Damien Martinez. The man ran for 4 touchdowns in the first half against Stanford. He is poised for another important moment against Washington. And we've got him on the show coming up next. Talkin Beavers is presented by Par Lumber. This week's legendary performance is presented by Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition. And if legendary is going to describe one player on this Oregon State team this season, it is this young man we're talking to next. Damien Martinez just hit the 1,000-yard mark after the game against the Stanford Cardinal, where he had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 touchdowns in the first half to help lead the Beavers to a landslide victory. So welcome Damien Martinez to the show. Damien, I cannot wait to get to know a little bit more about you, but first, I want to talk about that first half against the Cardinal, because 4 touchdowns, sir. What was working so well for you?
I mean, really just, you saw what the O-line was doing in the front. They were blocking their butts off. So, that's for one, shout out to them. But, they were helping me see the hole and just making holes for me. It was, easy to do my part after they do their job. So, yeah.
What is the relationship like between offensive line and running back?
We meet with them every week. I mean, you got to be on the same page, especially for pass protection. Like I said, you got to know who's protecting who. So they got to keep the quarterback, protected so they can get the ball out to the receivers. So, I mean, it works hand in hand. The run game and the pass game, it correlates together and just help each other out. So, yeah.
And I mean, what about on a personal level? Are those guys asking you like, hey, after a game like Saturday, maybe dinner's on you this time because we're the ones who make you look so good?
Yeah, I've tried to take them to dinner before. We just got to get it set up. It's just hard during the season, but yeah, we definitely have a good relationship outside of football.
Well, it certainly seems like it's paying off, and I want to talk about where you started playing football because this week named an honorable mention to the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Weekly Award, which is given to players who have ties to the state of Texas. You are from Louisville, Texas. So how did playing football in Texas growing up through high school impact who you are?
I mean, I'm pretty sure y'all heard Texas high school football is it's really like that. It's number one to me at any high school football. So yeah, Texas. I mean, football in Texas is big. Just growing up, I mean, Pee Wee, it was big even then. Their games are packed there. So just growing up, games has always been big. The tradition is just crazy.
I want to talk about your mom too, because I know you guys have gotten much closer throughout the last few years. But growing up, walk us through what life looked like growing up with your relationship with her.
Yeah, growing up, we weren't that close, but yeah, we definitely got closer in the last few years, especially towards the end of high school. I lived with her for one point, and I moved with my grandparents, probably till middle school, and after middle school, then I lived with my uncle, and then moved to my best friend for high school because I moved back to go play with all my friends in Pee Wee. After all that moving, I moved to go back to play with my friends from Pee Wee in high school. So then I just finished my career there, and yeah, now I'm here.
So football seems like it's been pretty consistent throughout your life. How did the consistency of football help you through some of the inconsistencies that you had to deal with growing up with different living situations?
I mean, football, it's kind of like everybody says, it's like a getaway. You're not really thinking about anything else about just football, what you're going to do, your assignment, things like that. You're not really thinking about us, you're just having fun.
I know your childhood has some things in it that are still impacting the way you play today. You wore that green band in the game against Colorado. Can you share with us what that was for?
That was from my cousin, Eric Lozano. I had some family come to that game. They haven't seen me play since probably I don't even know, maybe Pee Wee since a long time. But, they came to that game. I had that green band on for them. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit more about your cousin and your friendship growing up.
I mean, we were real close growing up. I used to be with my uncle all the time. So I'd be over there at his house, and my cousin, we just together all the time, every weekend. He passed away in a car accident. Just another regular day after school, and yeah.
What did it mean to you to wear that band against the Colorado Buffaloes and have the game that you did to honor him?
It was kind of crazy. I mean, I didn't have a 100-yard game for a minute until then, and then now I have this past 100-yard game this time. So just want to keep that going, but yeah, it was kind of crazy just to have that game like that wearing that green band when they showed up.
And now we turn our attention to obviously a massive game for you guys coming this Saturday. The Huskies coming to Corvallis with a lot on the table. You guys have the opportunity to be the first team this season to hand them a loss. What do you have to do to play your role in doing that?
I mean, simple as you said, play my role, do what I do, and everybody just do what they do and execute their job, get it done. Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of eyes. There's going to be a lot of people who maybe haven't noticed the season, the special season that you guys have put together in Corvallis. How do you block all that out and at the same time prepare for a task unlike any other one that you've had this season?
I mean, the whole season we've been blocking it out. We haven't really looked ahead at anybody. We've taken every game one by one. That's the process we've had. The process Coach Smith is, preached every week. So, just look one game at a time.
So with this one game, what would it mean for you, Damien, to have a fantastic game against the Huskies and help Oregon State get the win on Saturday?
I always want to have a fantastic game, but like I said, it's about getting the dub and just everybody doing their job. If I do have a fantastic game, that means the O-line's doing the job. That means the receivers are blocking and doing their job, catching the ball. The quarterback's doing the job, getting it to them, So either way, it's great.
Awesome. Well, Damien, best of luck on Saturday against the Huskies. Thank you so much for joining us here on Talkin Beavers.
Thank you.
We'll have more Talkin Beavers when we come back. Talkin Beavers is presented by Par Lumber. Stay ready with Leatherman. Leave nothing undone. Welcome back to Talkin Beavers. Certainly Oregon State going to have to leave nothing undone if they want to do what no team has done so far this season, which is take down the Huskies. We heard Damien Martinez talk about the evolution of this ground game and his role in it. Now, Jonathan Smith always hems and haws when you ask him for a weakness of the opponent that he is facing, because he truthfully believes that every single team is of great caliber. And while that is true, this week, Mike, he did give a little bit of an answer and said if there's any weakness in the Washington Huskies armor, it is that sometimes they have the tendency to score very quickly, and that means the defense has to stay on the field more often.
Yeah, I mean, you really are reaching. One is reaching and stretching if you talk about a team's weaknesses. Well, they score too quickly. I mean, Washington is one of the great offenses in the history of this conference and one of the best in the country. And they do score quickly, and that sometimes can get a defense which has just been out there right back on the field. And I think maybe Jonathan hinting at that. But the thing I've noticed, and certainly Washington has benefited from, AJ, is the last 2 weeks, they've gotten a 256-yard game from Dylan Johnson, and he backed that up with another 107 against Utah in the victory this past Saturday. So they're getting some productivity in the run game. And as great as Michael Penix Jr. is, and everyone says the front runner for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he is, he's getting a little bit of more help now in that ground game behind a good offensive line that's playing good football. So I'm not, Jonathan, if he was asked to try to find any kind of flaw, it's a pretty small one given how Washington has evolved offensively this year.
Yeah, Mike. And I think the one thing that the Beavers are tasked with this week is trying to solve the riddle that no one has been able to solve in the Washington Huskies. I mean, what do? You do the simple things. You don't try to overthink it. You lean on what you do well. That will be the point of emphasis this week, and trying to minimize the amount of things that you do incorrectly or do wrong during the game. And I think whoever does that the best, whoever at the end of the game and at the end of the day doesn't make too many mistakes, will come out with the victory.
The Beavers did do a good job last year in Seattle, albeit in atmospheric river-like conditions against Michael Penix Jr. Remember, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold had a pick six in Seattle last year. Deshaun Fenwick on the other side rushed for over 100 yards.
Yeah.
The difference last year was the Beavers really didn't have a complementary passing game. So, Jason, when you talk about what Washington does, what are you going to do? Last year, Washington eventually could load up on the run game because the Beavers only threw for 66. DJU is playing some hot football with big shots down the field that I think is, again, going to kind of swing this thing, advantage Beavers to be able to do both in their ballpark, where they've been playing so well here the last 2 years.
Yeah. And
I want to talk about the quarterbacks, Mike, because you mentioned DJU, and of course Michael Penix Jr. is somebody that the nation has their eyes on when you talk about potential Heisman hopefuls and front runners and everything like that. Jonathan Smith had some insight into what he thinks makes Penix Jr. just so hard to beat. We'll hear from him when we come back on Talkin Beavers. Talkin Beavers is presented by Par Lumber.
He's accurate as all get out. He's got a big-time arm. He's got a ton of confidence, which he should, a ton of confidence in giving those guys shots one-on-one. He recognizes coverage. He's not all just throwing it down the field, chuck and duck type thing. The ability to avoid sacks. He's athletic enough, but he's definitely looking to throw. You're not going to fool him with pressure. The ball comes out of his hands. And so he doesn't take sacks. He gives guys chances. Accurate. He stands in there when he needs to. That's why he's one of the best in the country.
Welcome back to Talkin Beavers. Jason, when you have a quarterback like Michael Penix Jr., who Jonathan Smith just listed a whole lot of strengths for, and I didn't hear any weaknesses, what do you as a defense do to get this guy out of his rhythm?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing you do, AJ, is that you try and get into his head. And I tried to do just that because I'm not sure if you're aware of it. I think we talked about it a little bit last year, but Michael Penix Jr. is actually a family through marriage. So I tried calling him. I tried calling his mom. I tried calling all of the people on his side of the family just so I could talk to him just a little bit. Tell him, please don't play as well as you've been playing this whole entire year against us. Please, 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 please. but he wouldn't take the call. Neither would his mom, neither would the rest of the family. So I think you try to get in his head early on. But seriously, I think you do try to get in his head, whether it's by trying to get near his feet and trying to close the pocket, try to make him uncomfortable. I think it is the best way to do that.
Jace, I love it. Pulling out all the stops to try and get the Beavers this really important win on Saturday over the Huskies. Mike, we talked about it's the first time that these two teams are meeting up with both of them ranked in the top 10. It's really important for what both Oregon State and Washington are trying to do this season. But you are the encyclopedia when it comes to all things Oregon State football. Give us some context about what this means in the history of this matchup.
It's the biggest ever. It's the biggest ever matchup between the two programs that have been playing one another since 1897. But they've never had a bigger game than this one that we get to talk about, that we get to go see, that Jonathan Smith gets to coach in as the head coach. This is my 267th broadcast on the radio this Saturday, Beavers Huskies. 267. This will only be the 5th time that the Beavers have been in the top 10 going into the game that I've called, and bless Jonathan Smith's heart, the quarterback, now the coach, is involved in 4 of those 5. So I'm just indebted to that kid that Mike Riley said, when I went to recruit him, I said, I'd like to talk to your quarterback, and they brought out this kid, and it turned out to be Jonathan Smith back in 1997, who has had some memorable games against the Huskies on the field as a head coach, and he's sitting on his biggest game ever as a head coach with Oregon State, and it's against Washington. I can hardly wait. I'm just excited that we get to be part of this event Saturday at Reser.
Yeah.
Mike, if you are indebted to Jonathan Smith and the access given to you by Mike Riley for him, we are indebted to you. 267 broadcasts. Amazing. We are so excited to have you on this show, and we're ready for 268, hopefully talking about that Oregon State win. But Beaver Nation, win, lose, or draw, well, no draws, but win or lose, we'll be here with you next week. 4:30 kickoff in Reser Stadium on Saturday against the Huskies, and we'll be right back here next week to break it on down. For Jason, Mike, myself, have a great one.